Okay, let's talk about those Forgotten Realms.
Mm.
And I said, let's talk about it. What I mean is Mike's going to talk about it.
Sure.
Because Mike has the books, whereas we do not.
I do.
What I do have before we start, though, is a quick glance at the table of contents, which was posted online. And we do have a first impressions review from Christian Hoffer up on EN World as well, which you can take a look at. But I guess the table of contents is exactly what you've got in front of you there as well, Mike.
I do.
yeah. So where should we start? So we've got two books. You mentioned to me before we started that you've paid less attention to this sort of player options side of things.
Yeah, I didn't dig into like the subclasses and spells
Sure.
and sort of the mechanic-y bits. I was more interested in how much lore and general coverage of the Forgotten Realms that it had.
Okay.
They have.
So you, just for a context point of view, are you historically a Forgotten Realms fan? Are you someone who knows a lot about the Forgotten Realms? Because not at all. I would intersected with it.
I definitely would define myself as a fan of the Forgotten Realms.
Okay.
I would certainly not say that I am deep into the total knowledge of the realms. Like, I mean, I've been playing in the realms for 30 some years. Right, my first campaign when I was 14 was in the Forgotten Realms and with the old gray box. But I'm not a detail-oriented person in general, so like, there's lots of little specific things that I miss from time to time. But I love all that lore.
Yeah, I mean, my background is I've never played in the Forgotten Realms. Maybe once or something that I don't remember. I've got a couple of Forgotten Realms books. But it's never. I was always a Dragonlance fan as a kid. That was always my go-to setting. And then after that, I was always a homebrew guy. So when it comes to published setting, by osmosis, I kind of know a certain amount about the Forgotten Realms, but I've never gone out of my way to delve into it in any way.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the problems of the realms that many people bring up, even to the point where it is addressed in these books, which is you want to GM the realms, but you don't feel like you know enough about it, and or one of your players knows more about it than you do, and both
that is almost certainly going to be the case. Yeah.
That is something they directly address in these books.
Okay.
Like it's a situation that they bring up, and they give the common advice that you would expect to hear, which is it's your world. You can make what you want of it. So if you don't know any details, you can fill in your details. And if you have somebody who knows more about the realms, you can tell them, the realms we're playing here is our realms, not necessarily the realms that you know. And I'd like to tap into your knowledge for things that I might not know. And those are very common refrains for what do you do when you want to play in a setting where you don't know it particularly well. And you might have a player who knows it better than you. That's about as good as you're going to get. And then the rest depends on your player and how well you can work with them and not go that, not constantly get that. Well, actually, that's not.
Yeah, I mean, that depends very much on the nature of the player, doesn't it?
Yeah. Was in a different state. They have it, Gonf Bayenre was a different archmage.
Yeah. Well, I suppose from our points of view, that is like a little bit of a problem. I guess from the player's point of view, they're like, well, why are you saying your game's Forgotten Realms if you're not going to use the Forgotten Realms lore?
Right. Yeah.
That's correct.
So anyway, let's take a look at these books then. So Mike, what's your sort of like overall quick sort of takeaway?
I have my overall takeaway is they're really good. For one, I like them a lot. They're also really expensive for what you get. If you recall, and I can dive into both. I'll dive into both of them, but the expense one is a consideration because if you recall, a year or so ago, maybe a little bit more than a year, they said, hey, because of lots of things going on in the industry, we're going to have to increase the price, the standard price of one of our hardcover books from $50 to $60. Right? That happened about a year ago. And then, of course, what was interesting is the core books came out and they were $50. They actually they kept them low, but even though the page counts on those books are much higher. So this one you could say, okay, well, one of these books is $50 and the other one is $60. So it's $110 for the total set. My feeling is both of these books together are one book, right? They feel like one book.
Are they very light? Do you mean?
No, they're big. I mean, page.
Okay.
So this is the interesting thing. Page count wise, they're getting close to 500 pages.
Wow.
Word count wise, they're about the same as like Eberron Rising from the Last War as a single volume, and they have fewer words than the original campaign setting guide from 3rd edition D&D. So, and that book, if you increase the price of that book to inflation, with inflation is about $72 or $73 today for the amount of total words that you're getting. That means these books aren't 20% more expensive; they're actually 100% more expensive.
Who's this? Some Jessica.
Yeah, we've got some. We've been raided by some random trolls.
Who is this? Who is this person?
What
asking questions about Baldur's Gate 3.
Right.
Coming in from Facebook.
This is really interesting. It's too bad Jessica's not on the show, because I would have this would be a contention of debate, which is, oh my God, Baldur's Gate again? How many times are you gonna make me buy Baldur's Gate? Right.
Well, we have
obviously there are some people who are like, I want to know how much Baldur's Gate 3 stuff is in there, because that's what I really care about.
Well, Baldur's Gate 3 has turned into a drinking game here now. Every time Jessica mentions Baldur's Gate 3, someone has to take a drink.
The answer to her question is yes, there are references. There are additional references on the cover. There's a good picture of Gortash, one of the 3 villains. Spoiler, Baldur's Gate 3 spoiler. One of the villains in the video game is Gortash, and there's a really cool piece of artwork of Gortash in it. What's interesting is all of the, since we're on that, we'll jump to that one piece. So there's 5 main focus regions covered in the Adventures in Faerun book, one of which is Baldur's Gate, and one of which is Icewind Dale. And those, when I heard about them, they bothered me, because I'm like, oh my God, I literally bought 2 other Icewind Dale products in the last 10 years. Legacy of the Crystal Shard and Rime of the Frost Maiden. I've already played 3 full campaigns in Icewind Dale.
Wow.
In the last 10 years. I don't need more Icewind Dale stuff. I want Thay. Where's Thay? Right? Thay hasn't been touched in 2nd edition, and it's a
I assume the whole book is
out loud.
Yeah.
I assume it's all Sword Coast focused as usual,
it's
is it?
not. No.
Okay.
That's very interesting. There's a heavy focus on the Sword Coast.
Yes.
But and this is where I go, like, also, I think it is inaccurate to say that this book, by the way, the covers are beautiful. I got the special edition covers at my local game shop, and they're beautiful. So there's a Heroes of Faerun book, and there's an Adventures in Faerun book.
Yeah.
And it says on them Dungeon Master expansion and player expansion. I think that's not accurate. These are both Dungeon Master books.
Okay.
It happens to be that the player one has character options in it, but that one has an atlas of all of the realms, not just those 5 focus regions. And it's 80 pages long. There's an 80-page section of this book that covers every area of the Forgotten Realms, right? So that makes this book more of an overall gazetteer of the Forgotten Realms than the other book, which is the GM book, right? Which gives me this, like, these 2 books together are one volume. And if you're a GM who wants this, I can't imagine not buying both, and I can't imagine they're thinking a GM isn't going to buy both. Right? They feel like one book. Another weird one, which I mentioned while we were on break, the Heroes book is the one that includes the map. There's a tear out for entire giant Forgotten Realms map, new Mike Schley Forgotten Realms map, and that's not in the GM guide. That's in the player guide.
That's an odd choice.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah,
that's weird.
I mean, I love having maps as a player, but
yes,
I would say I need them as a GM.
Yes. So if you're going to be
in the Forgotten Realms as a setting, would the average person who lives there be aware of the geography of the entire?
I seriously doubt it. It depends on where you go. If you go to Waterdeep talking to a sage, probably. But if you're talking about like a farmer outside of Phandalin, I wouldn't think so. Right?
No, I suppose not.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah. Anyway, I think they're really, really good, but I do think that the cost, especially in today's turbulent economic times, is something to consider, because you're paying $110 in my opinion for one volume. It's a big, thick volume with a lot of stuff covered. But that's high. So you asked for my top ones. The other one is I would not buy these books if you are not a Realms fan, and if you plan on running a game in the Realms, right? Like, I think, and particularly running a game in one of those 5 regions. Like, I look at it and say, I would totally run a campaign in the Cormyr, or I'm sorry, in the Dalelands, right? Like, Dalelands is one of the areas. It has been, again, 35 years since I played a game in the Dalelands, and they have a nice big juicy section of the Dalelands in there with lots of cool stuff. I think it would be totally worth it to pick these up, to have new character options that are Forgotten Realms based, have a lot of focus material on the realms in general, gods, daily life, calendars, holidays, all the kind of things that you need to fill in the details, and then zero down into things that are going on around the various various towns and villages of the Dalelands, plus Myth Draenor as their big kind of adventure zone area. There's one long adventure and 50 small adventures in this.
Wow.
And the one long adventure, they say you can put near any of the regions, but it was clearly meant to be dropped in the Dalelands area. So that feels like, if you remember, like the Eberron Rising from the Last War book had a huge thing on Sharn. Right? And the idea was like, if you're going to run an Eberron campaign, you could do worse than to start in Sharn and then expand out from there. This one also feels like you could do a lot worse than starting in the Dalelands and expanding out from there.
Yeah. I was looking at because I've got the table of contents in front of me. So looking at Adventures in Faerun. So we've got the areas it covers are the Dalelands.
Yep.
Icewind Dale.
Yep.
What else have we got? We got Kalimshan.
Yep.
The Moonshae Isles.
Yep.
Baldur's Gate.
That's it. Yep.
And
those are the 5. Yeah, those are the 5.
And then we've got the Adventures. Yeah.
The Adventures Library of Lekka something or other.
Left-Trontos. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so those sections, if you look at, like, I was really curious because for me it was like, well, I want deep Forgotten Realms lore is what I'm really looking for, and so I was like, how much of these books are giving me deep Forgotten Realms lore? And it's a lot, right? Each of those sections run between 30. I think Moonshae is 29 pages, Dalelands is 45 pages. 38 pages for Icewind Dale, 32 pages for Kalimshan, 35 pages for Baldur's Gate. And so my complaints were like, I already bought Icewind Dale and you're making me buy Icewind Dale again. And I've already got, I got Baldur's Gate coming out of my ears. I really don't need more Baldur. There's nothing forgotten about Baldur's Gate in this Forgotten Realms book, right? However, what's interesting is they did kind of, I didn't look quite as deep on the Baldur's Gate, but in the Icewind Dale, they already wrote around the premise that the events of both Legacy of the Crystal Shard and Rime of the Frostmaiden have already taken place. So now we have the expanded area. And the other interesting thing is it wasn't so much on just focusing on a region, it was also focusing on a theme. So kind of your survivalist horror of the Dalelands, or I'm sorry, the survivalist horror of Icewind Dale versus your more traditional European fantasy of the Dalelands versus your kind of urban intrigue of Baldur's Gate. Kind of focus on the Fae and fairies and the Moonshae, and sort of Eastern and genie kind of stuff going on in Kalimshan. I haven't really read that area thoroughly either.
Okay.
But yeah, and a lot. And then if you look at the Heroes book, this is where I think like why it's kind of mislabeled as a player guide. There are 48 pages. I said 80 pages, but that's close. There are 48 pages for the Guide to the Realms, right? Which is that describes every region of the realms. The Gods of the Realms is 33 pages. The Factions is 39 pages, right? So that's a lot of page count focusing on lore, which is great for me because that's what I want. Right? I want to have lots of information and lots of lore, and there is sort of a player focus on that. Right. But some people brought up that there's actually spoilers to things. So like they talk about, I think they talk about Phandalin and they spoil the Phandelver and Below hardcover adventure. Right. Like they say like what's the big thing going on there. And they just tell you. Right. And you're like, well, there was like 3 chapters of that book. Here. So yeah, a lot covered. 38 pages of monsters, 5 pages of magic items, character options. So here's their character options is 32 pages. So the whole idea of like, hey, we have new subclasses, we have new feats, we have new backgrounds. That only takes 32 pages. The magic spells are 11 pages, right?
We've got equipment as well, I suppose, and the circle casting rules. I guess are player-facing rules.
That is right, but it's still not a lot, right? It's pages,
equipment, whatever. So, like, in terms of what you want to see in a book, it feels like this is a really pleasing and positive book for you. Lots of lore to help you really have these settings fleshed out for you. Whereas myself, I don't like other people's lore. I'd rather make it.
Then don't buy it.
Yeah. I'm really getting that vibe.
I've had people who were like, well, could I steal stuff from this? Like, yeah, but not for $110.
No,
right? Like, you can go make your own stuff up. Like, I don't, the idea of like this to me, there are other, I mean, like I'll pick my own book, right? I wrote a book called City of Arches, and which doesn't cost $110. And City of Arches is literally designed for you to be able to drop into your own campaign. Like you can put it in the Forgotten Realms. You can put it in Eberron. You can put it your home campaign, wherever you want to put it. And it was designed to be kind of stripped for parts like that. This one's so in depth and so could you? Of course you can. Like you can take the monsters and put them in anything. Is it worth $110 to buy this just to strip it for parts for a home campaign? I would argue no. I really think like that's why I say like if you don't, it's really simple. If you don't like the Forgotten Realms, don't buy it. Right? Like,
I mean,
not the book for you. And
if you
don't really plan on running campaigns in there. If you really like the realms and you just want to live in the realms and read about that stuff and you enjoy it, then sure, like pick them up. But to me, it's like for me, the argument that I would make is A, you have to like the realms. B, you plan on running a campaign there, and C, you plan on running a campaign in one of the regions that it focuses on, at least one. And if you're doing those, then I think you get a lot of value out of these books. And if you want to run realm stuff, this is my other argument. If you want to run realm stuff, and you're like, I don't know about all this, and I don't like the regions, and the freaking 3rd edition Forgotten Realms campaign guide is $16 on DM's Guild, right? It's dirt cheap, and it has more. It's like 80,000 words bigger, right? Than both of these books put together. So it's got a ton of material in it. So if you just want to kind of dive into the realms and you don't want to spend $110, like that old book is really, really good. And that's kind of the gold standard. I mean, lots of people say the old gray box set, which you can also buy in the DM's Guild. That's good. Those are really good too. But I feel like if you want to just kind of soak in realms lore or find stuff that you can strip for parts, it's hard to beat $16 versus $110.
Yeah. So this is basically. You need to be a Realms fan to buy this. Is what you're saying.
I would say so. Yeah. Or if you're new to RPG, right? If you're new, like there's a ton of people that are I think the majority, right? The majority of 5e players have not had a Forgotten Realms release ever, right? For them, like this is the first Forgotten Realms, what was it? The Sword Coast book was one of the first books that came out, and the growth of 5e didn't happen until after that. So this might be the first real. I mean, obviously, there's been a bunch of adventures set there, and that explained a lot of the realms. But this is the first one. So if you're like, hey, and I think Christian Hoffer talked about this in his. I read his article earlier today, before we came on, and I think he mentioned this, that like one of the big kind of problems with the core books is that there was almost no flavor in them. Right. There was no setting. There was no real kind of description. There's no list of gods. Like I found that really bizarre, like no list of gods. And then he said, now it makes more sense if you look at these books and you're like, okay, that's the mechanics. That's the scaffolding. And this is the paint, right? This is everything around it.
Okay.
And then because like, boy, I forget, there's 50 gods listed or something like that, right? So if you want gods, boy, you got.
So I was just looking at the list.
33 pages of gods. So,
if you want to enjoy that full Dungeons and Dragons experience as a new player, all you have to do is drop $270 for the 3-4 books,
right. Like
and these 2 books here. Then,
it's starting to get pretty pricey. Yeah.
I mean,
$260, but yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I do beg your pardon, my mistake.
Right.
I look forward to seeing the Beadle and Grimm version.
Yeah, right. Like how is that gonna... I mean, so this is kind of interesting because one of the things I really love about role-playing games, one of the things I'm kind of fascinated by with role-playing games, is that you can have a cost of 0 or a cost of millions of dollars in this hobby, right? I mentioned seeing that Forgotten Realms map. That place has millions of dollars worth of stuff in it. And if you look at the Critical Role studio, right, that is $1 million RPG studio, right? Like that. If you were like, hey, I'm going to stream a game at a nice place, that's $1 million studio. And then the other side is like you can play with the SRD, right? You can play with free materials and go, as I like to say, go to the dog track and steal a pencil, and you can play D&D for nothing. But
so your only cost
like,
is basically one set of dice, basically.
Maybe, but there's online dice rollers you can get for free.
Yeah,
So
or make spinners, man.
Go to your local game shop and crawl underneath the tables, and you'll find dice down there. They're questionable. They might have been there a while, right? You probably want to wash them and probably get a penicillin shot when you're done. But after you're done, you've got a nice set of dice. So I like that, but it feels like, certainly from Wizards, that the average price is moving up. Right now, the core books are not. The core books are the same price they were back in 2014.
Yeah,
even direct. So those books I feel like are actually a pretty good value, because inflation certainly went up in the 10 years that those books came out. This one's feeling a little pricey, and like I had talked about, Eberron Rising from the Last War is kind of my gold standard 5e Wizards published source book. And I remember looking at that and being like, we're never going to see that value again, right? The font size was smaller, so there was more words in the overall book.
Yeah.
The book itself was $50 and it was 320 pages. And you're like, they're never doing that again, right? That was it. Like, you get that on Amazon I think there was a time where it was like $19 on Amazon. And I'm like, that is the best deal like you're going to get. So if you're, money matters to a lot of people these days. And that's why I'm kind of fixated on that. But now, if you happen to be in a good position where you can spend $110 on a source book, this is fantastic. Like I did, right? I went, Michelle, my wife and I ran to the local game shop yesterday and picked them up, and they're beautiful. They're beautiful books. The writing is good. The one thing I really look for is like how adventure oriented is the writing, which is something I'm not sure the older books do well. I don't know that the 3rd edition book does quite as good a job at this. Of like, if you're describing a location, I ought to be able to get a hook out of that I can then build an adventure around, or even maybe build a campaign on. And they've done a lot of that in here. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but they've many times I would look at it and be like, I could run an adventure based on that little prompt about that one little town right over here.
Yeah. I mean, which is something that 13th Age, to shout back to earlier in the podcast, that's something that they do extremely well. Like, they don't bind you to a canon. They offer you 8 to 13 different options, many of which are contradictory for each particular point they bring out, which it's absolutely fantastic,
right?
And it's just hooks galore, that book. Do you feel that there's like, I mean, obviously it's not going to be a similar amount of hooks, but are there good hooks in these?
Yes, there are a lot. So they really, and again, maybe, I mean, I'd have to like sit and look at them side by side, but I definitely feel like more so than older versions of the Forgotten Realms, this one, in a few different ways have they make it like adventure oriented. This idea of like, I'm a GM, I'm a busy guy, I want to run games for my friends, give me material to help me run games for my friends. And there's kind of 3 things they've done with that. One of them is that idea that in all of the description, not all of them, but in many of the descriptions, you can kind of pick out a hook and be like, this is, I can grab that idea and I could build an adventure around it. And that's even in the regional guide, right? That's even in the quote unquote player guide, where they have adventure-y sort of things. There's a little bit of occasion of a little bit of like, there are dangerous monsters in these woods. And I'm like, well, that's not a useful statement. What kind of dangerous monsters might you find in those woods? I know there are dangerous monsters in my fantasy RPG. Tell me where it was. So there's a couple of instances of that. But then the second thing they do is these regional focuses, where they really deep dive into them, and the regions have things like, here's the kind of style of play that you could have here. Here are the bosses that you could have here. They have campaign arcs. If you're running a campaign, this is the kind of arc that you could run for this campaign. So that's very oriented around, GMs wanting to run adventures. And then they have, we were talking a little bit about innovation in RPG, innovation at Wizards. And one of the things I would say, like, well, they're giving this a shot, and we'll see kind of how people dig it. If you remember in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they have these adventure scenarios that are like a half a page. They're like less than 500 words. And the intent is that there's enough stuff in there that a GM could grab it and run. They have 50 of those in there. So these are regional focused, they're faction focused, they're location focused, they're kind of situation focused. And they kind of tag them and describe them. They say what level they are, they say what kind they are. And then they have like really short adventures that, in my opinion, are reading a lot of them. Many of them I feel like, this is enough. Like you're always going to have to add more to it. Your group is going to add more to it. But this is enough of a good scaffold for me to be able to build a session with my friends. Some of them are better than others, but I don't think that's a big surprise. And most of them have new maps, and so there's a lot of maps and that's mostly in this the adventures when they call it that. Adventures in Faerun is accurate, right? Because there are lots and lots and lots of adventures in here. There's one chapter that's packed with about 30 of those adventures, and then the others are spread into the other sections. So if you go to the Daleland section, there's like 5 or 6 Daleland adventures, and they all have like a spread with like a map, and then they're like one page. And I think that is I applaud it. I don't know how people are going to, different groups are going to, or different GMs are going to grab onto those. Some are going to be like, are you kidding me? 400 words? How can you pack an adventure into 400 words? I need at least 32 pages, right? And but I look at them and I go, I think this is enough for me to get an idea of what I want. And there's so many that I can skip one and be like, I don't like that one. I'll just do another.
Yeah.
You can download one of them for free as well from D&D Beyond. They put that out last week, I think it was. Right. And we talked about that last week. So if you want to get an idea of what those adventures look like, there's an example up there that you can go and take a look at.
Yeah, and there's a ton of maps, right? Like one thing is I think there's way more maps in here than I've ever seen in a campaign source book, because at least half of those adventures have a map associated with it. And then they do something kind of interesting, which I like, which is some of them don't have a map, but say you can use the map of the Wizard's Tower in the Dungeon Master's Guide, right? So they're like, we know you have the Dungeon Master's Guide. We have a bunch of maps in there. You can use one of those maps to fill in this. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, right? Like that's a way to get more value out of the other book.
Sensible cross-reference.
Yeah, okay. and I think, so I'm a GM advice guy, right? That's kind of my shtick. And to me, that's teaching good lessons, because it's saying like, these are loose frameworks for adventures, and you can go ahead and reuse those maps that you have in the DMG. And then like, oh, I could do that on my own too. And like, yes, you can, right? Like, so I think it's doing a little bit of subtle GM training in there too.
Nice.
And in a way that I think is effective, which is this, like you don't need as much as you think you need in order to run an adventure, and you can reuse stuff like maps and kind of reskin them to fit the adventure that you've got. So I like that a lot.
You mentioned factions.
Yes.
Now I haven't read the 2024 DMG. Obviously, I haven't seen the Forgotten Realms books. But is there advice on how to run a faction?
Yes. In the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, or in this?
In either.
So I don't remember what the Dungeon Master's Guide says about factions. I know it. I know it does. I know it has stuff.
It's got something about it,
but it's not like it was in the 2014 books where it says, "Hey, here are 5 factions." Right? Like I think the old Dungeon Master's Guide had the Harpers and Order of the Gauntlet. They picked the Forgotten Realms factions, right? This one has a bunch of factions in it. I think it has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4,
I remember
5,
you said
6,
there was
7,
like 39
8. Yeah, so there are 8
factions,
major factions in here that are written as though your characters could come from these factions or work with these factions, even though they are the Red Wizards, the Zinterim, and the Cult of the Dragon. So it has 3 what I would consider to be evil factions that you could be parts of. And it's kind of funny. They have this cool table of like which factions get along with which other factions. And like, the Red Wizard is like indifferent to 2 and hated by everybody else. Right? Like, so it's really kind of funny. And then in the faction section, they have 2 different things that tie back to the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, which is gaining renown. The idea that the more you do things that affect these factions, the more your reputation with the faction goes up. And then you get stuff, right? Like things will happen. And they tied back into bastions. And there are both bastions. I think there are bastions that are associated with factions, and also bastions that are focused on those regions. Like if you're in the Dalelands, hey, this area could end up becoming a bastion for you that you could then build out into other things. So they didn't just forget about those 2 new features of 2024 D&D. They have added that stuff in here, and I think I haven't really used bastions. They didn't grab me super hard when I read them originally, because they didn't feel like they were solving the big problem I have, which is what should characters spend their money on.
Cash sink.
And they're not a cash sink.
And some of them are cash generators.
They actually generate.
That is a problem.
Like, now it's even worse. Also, like, do we really want to turn our game into The Sims? But they have them here, and they see. I think like even if you're like, hey, I'm not going to use bastions directly, but I am going to have home bases. This still gives you an idea of like the kind of things that you could do with home bases. Yeah, and they all have symbols. So, and the gods do too, which I think is like another sort of table usable thing of like, here are all the gods. Here's the symbol of the god. So now I can describe that symbol on a wall, and then the players could learn. Like, I could say, like, you find a 6-pointed snowflake etched into the stone wall of this ancient freezing cavern, and you're like, that's Oral, right? That is a symbol of Oral, right?
It's bamboo, dude.
That's really useful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I know you haven't like delved into the players options so much, but I was looking at the table of contents here, and I noticed it has a species section, which is only 6 pages long. So I'm guessing section? The species, the character species section.
Yes.
So really I was just curious. What I presume they haven't presented each one in full in there. In those 6 pages.
No, so the character species section, this is something I like, right? And one of the things, and I could be different. I know I'm different than other people, but one of the things I think about is like, if I'm dropping my $110 on these books, I'm kind of hoping that one day I'm sliding on my walker with the little tennis balls stuck on the end, and I can pull these off the shelf and still enjoy them and use them in my 12th edition D&D game, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm more interested in the stuff that I think is more timeless than like, here's a bunch of crunchy mechanics you're not going to use. And the reason why is because when I pull the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms guide and I see, hey, here's a page-long stat box for Elminster, I'm like, yeah, I'm not using that, right? Like, hey, I didn't use it back then because it was too complicated, and I'm sure not going to use it now. So one of the cool things this does with species is it describes what the role of the species is in the Forgotten Realms. So it's not like, here's a bunch of new species. It's like, here are what the Aasimar are like in the realms. Here are what Dragonborn are like in the realms, right?
Okay.
Here are elves, and it talks about sun and moon elves, which are unique to Forgotten Realms and what those mean. But it doesn't say, like, here's a whole new set of mechanics for elves. Right?
So it just refers you back to the core rulebooks for the
its expectation is the core rulebook is where you're going to get the mechanics for elves, and instead, here's where they fit. Humans, right? A huge section on humans and orcs. And orcs are different, right? Because we never really had orc as a playable character race in a core book before. Yeah. And this gets into, like, Obuld Many Arrows, right? The whole connection of the orcs in Forgotten Realms had a big focus on this guy, King Obuld Many Arrows, right? And so it talks about like what the orcs are like now. And so, yeah, in the race section, there is no, there are no crunchy bits. It's all lore.
Right.
Yeah. And again, maybe you're into that. Maybe you're like, oh, I really wanted new Sun Elf ancestry stuff.
Yeah.
I'm good with this, right? I'm all about like reskinning stuff, and to me, the flavor that we wrap around it, and I think like it makes it useful because what if I want to play with Shadowdark, right? What if I like the Forgotten Realms, but I'm like, I'd like to have that classic 2nd edition feel, and I'm going to use Shadowdark for it. Well, now I can use Shadowdark with this, and not worry that I wasted a bunch of money on a bunch of crunchy mechanics that I'm not going to use.
Yeah.
But when you get into subclasses, obviously, then you get into crunchy bits. But it's not a lot. They do have new backgrounds too, and the backgrounds are laid out the same way that they're laid out in the player's guide, kind of a big strip of art at the top, and then a very short, like 100-page background thing. And these have a lot of flavor. What's interesting is I like these so much better than I like the ones in the player's guide, because to me the player handbook, they were so boring, right? Guard, farmer. Right, these are not filling me with high fantasy feelings, right?
Yeah.
But now,
they're not trying you into the world, is what they're not doing with the fiction.
But I still feel like they could have been more flavorful than Farmer, right? Yeah, like there's something more there, especially when Farmer is the good one because it has toughness, and everybody wants toughness as a feat. But now it's Chondathian freebooter, dead magic dweller, Emerald Enclave caretaker, dragon cultist, ice fisher is kind of boring, Harper, Flaming Fist mercenary, right? These are very specific on, your role, and I think that, that really adds a lot of flavor to it.
Yeah, like I say, it ties you into the world as well, because your background is linked to a fiction element of the world rather than just farmer, which it doesn't. Yeah.
There's a bunch of new feats. I haven't looked into them. I always worry whenever there's new mechanics too, because it's like, oh God, is this going to break my game? Right? Is one of these things going to really do it? And I forget. I don't think. No, I can't remember. It was in this book. If I saw one, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to have to nerf that right away. So, yeah. Yeah, really good.
Yeah, but it sounds like Wizards are really knocking out the park in terms of lore.
Yes.
And I suppose that's really good to hear. Because,
and same as always, the physical design of the book. Like, if I could just spend a minute talking about this and D&D Beyond, right? the physical design of the book is just gorgeous, right? Like big, full, and this is where like, you know, the comparing it to the word count, right? This is where this is something you miss, like I miss when I'm just comparing word count, is the art in this book is way bigger. You have giant, like 3/4 page, you know, pictures of dragons, you know, doing stuff. It's really, really good. The layout is really nice. The art is great. You know, it's got tons and tons of little small maps. Again, this is in the player's guide, has the regional maps that show you, like, you know, Aglarond and Thay and Rashomon and, you know, all these locations. Some of them, like there's the one called the Forgotten Lands, and you're like, I'm never reading that, right? Like the font size on the map is super small. It's also super small on the fold out map too, right? It's really kind of hard to read some of these.
Yeah.
And you know, they struggled, right? Like, you know, they were like, oh, how do we make that so it's still readable? But the physical, something I think is missed when people just go and buy it on D&D Beyond is how gorgeous these physical books are, right? And like Wizards, all my complaints about it, the physical design is great, right? It really these are printed in America too, for anybody that's kind of interested in where they're printed. They're printed in the USA. I know that Wizards had recently moved to a US printer. I think they did that for the core books too. Which can account for the price, right? The whole reason it's $110 for, you know, the two books, like, you know, the printing in US printing is more expensive, certainly. There's the picture of Gortash for Jessica.
But what you've basically got there from a production value point of view is almost like coffee table books, because there's lots of art, there's lots of lore, there's lots of stuff to just sit there and browse through and read, rather than just being a rules reference manual.
It's also very table usable, right? Like that to me is the other shtick of like, so there's I spent some time kind of going through old Forgotten Realms books recently, because I was like, you know, we're missing all these great, I was still mad about Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate. And I was like, you know, there's all these other books from 2nd edition, 3rd edition D&D that we could dive into, and they have all this lore, and they're like, they were good back then, so why aren't they good now? You know, we still you know, we can still focus a lot on them. I forgot my train of thought.
Well, I guess one final question, because I think we're coming up to 4 o'clock and we have to go into gooseberries and so forth.
Yeah.
Is you mentioned that there's 5 areas that it focuses on, and too much Baldur's Gate, too much Icewind Dale. You're all.
I mean, so when I say too much, I am personal. This is like a Mike Shea personal thing. Which is like, I really would have loved Thay, because like I feel like in the same way that the other regions have these sort of types of gameplay, I feel like the you know, the overarching dark magocracy and a ruler who is a necromancer where undead is part of the citizenry, like that feels so different from like other stuff that we've seen, that, you know, I already got the survival horror of Icewind Dale. Rime of the Frost Maiden is still in print, and having another focus of an area that literally hasn't been touched, like there hasn't been a dedicated book about Thay since 2nd edition, like more than 30 years ago. So like, that's what I wanted, because I feel like, look, I was a good Wizard citizen. You put out Rime of the Frost Maiden, and I played it. I played it for 2 groups. I hated it, and I played it anyway.
I played it anyway.
Right, I played it anyway because I'm a good.
That's not how gaming's supposed to work, Mike. You're doing it wrong.
Corporate citizen, right? I did what you told me to do. And by the way, I also did what you told me to do and ran Legacy of the Crystal Shard back at the tail end of 4th and early into 5th edition, right? That was one of my first 5th edition adventures. So I playing the games you're putting out, and now you're making me do it again, right? 3rd time. So that's where I'm like, I want newer stuff. But, you know, the argument is people know Icewind Dale. Everybody loves Drizzt. You know, they want it. I don't think I'm not sure that's true. I don't think people care about Icewind Dale nearly as much as they used to. Now, Baldur's Gate, absolutely. And I'm not going to argue that they shouldn't do Baldur's Gate. Fine. Yeah. I also think, like, you know what would have been more interesting? Do a Baldur's Gate book. Right? Do a source book about Baldur's Gate that says, here's how to play in the aftermath of what happened at Baldur's Gate.
Well, they should have done that when the video game came out.
Yeah. Right. And then they can't ever quite seem to nail. They did nail the Stranger Things box set. They managed to get that out on time.
True.
But generally coordinating a print activity is really, really challenging.
Well,
so I'll get over it.
NIOB's got a job. You know, it's like to make this sort of thing work.
Yeah. And the main thing for me is like, I just know that those are 2 sections of this book I am not going to want to use for like 5 years. Because I don't need to run another Baldur's Gate campaign. I already ran, you know, Descent into Avernus, which I also didn't like. So I've already done Baldur's Gate, you know. And
how many of these games do you not like, Mike? You seem to run a lot of games that you don't enjoy.
Those are the 2 big ones, right?
Okay.
I think it was Descent into Avernus was one, and Rime of the Frostmaiden was the other. And that's where I said I'm no longer just going to run every Wizard's adventure that comes out. I am now going to decide whether I actually want to or not. And that's why I picked up like Vecna Eve of Ruin. And I'm like, I hate it, right? Like, I can't believe you have an adventure that's built upon betrayal from the very get-go. And then if they find out the truth, the whole adventure is over. So, I'm like, I'm not running that. Spoiler for anybody playing Vecna Eve of Ruin. But I don't mind spoiling it because I think it's such a vulnerable adventure. It deserves to be spoiled. So, but that, other people are probably happy with it. And I do look, the stuff they've done with Icewind Dale by having a new villain or like kind of a new weird set of villains and tying it back to the old Crinchinaban Crystal Shard stuff made it cool enough that I'm like, I don't know that I want to run a campaign there, but I could see getting back into this again. And I could, the Baldur's Gate stuff is interesting enough that, Baldur's Gate is kind of a big deal. I'm glad they didn't do Waterdeep because we already have Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So they already made some kind of decisions about not replicating their stuff. I could see it, but to me, like, what makes it up for me is the big ass section on the Dalelands I'm excited about, right? And they obviously put a lot of effort into that section, and the adventure, the bigger adventure is set there, and there's a lot of small adventures, and I feel like I could definitely run a campaign. And then even when we get to that price of like the $110, that's pretty cheap for like 50 sessions of 6 people around a table. 3 hours a session, enjoying a good campaign. Like that's cheaper than movies. It's cheaper than video games. It's cheaper than novels. So, I think it's good. It was the D&D Beyond I was going to talk about. So both books are available on D&D Beyond as well. My recommendation would be to pick up the Heroes book, or my recommendation would be get your players to buy the Heroes book on D&D Beyond because they're the ones that are going to get the value out of it for character options. And then as a GM, unless you're playing with maps, if you're going to play with maps or a VTT, it's probably worth picking up the Adventures book just for all the maps you get, right? Like there's a ton of digital maps that you're going to get with this on D&D Beyond. But if you're playing on any other kind of platform, I don't think you need to have the D&D Beyond version of Adventures in Faerun, because then you're still paying even more, right, on top of it. But I think the physical books are worth buying because A, you really own them, and B, they look really, really good.
Great objects of art, almost. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. That's a really comprehensive review.
Yeah, happy.
So that's hitting general release on November the 1st. I've got in front of me. When's that?
Tomorrow.
Sunday. That can't be right. Tomorrow. That can't be right.
Saturday's tomorrow.
No, it can't be November the 1st. When does it hit general release?
I don't know.
No.
Because there's usually when did you pick that one up, Mike? Because it's usually 2 weeks in the hobby stores, and then it
came out
release, isn't it?
I think it came out Tuesday. So Tuesday was when it was up on D&D Beyond, and I think Tuesday was the first day stores could have it. My store didn't get it till Thursday, but I got it yesterday. Yeah. So I think it's 2 weeks from Tuesday.
Oh, I found it the 11th, not the 1st. I found it. I don't know why I said the 1st. Yeah, November the 11th. So.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Because that'll be a Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.